Hello student. Today we talk about the recapitulation of Mendelian Principle, lecture number 2 from your chapter number 1st, recapitulation of Mendelian Principle and its application from genetics. So in this lecture we are talking about the principles Mendel who put forward some laws regarding to the hereditary and variation of characteristics of organism. So we know that in last lecture we talking about the work and experiment who done by the Mendel on the garden pea plant. He selected some traits and studied them for 8 years, and about 28,000 species plants are studied by the Mendel, and he used the mathematical techniques for the quantitatively result of these genetic traits. So basically, we know that the Gregor Mendel spent the best time in the garden and studied the plants for the observation and growing habitat of plants. And he selected the pea plant for his experiment of the hybridization. They may be the monohybrid cross or they may be dihybrid cross. And he observed some traits among them. So what do you think the reason behind the selecting the garden pea plant as his experimental plant? So there are some reason for choosing the garden pea plant as an experimental plant. First of all, garden pea has the presence of observable traits with contrasting form. So he chose the garden pea plant because this garden pea plant having the observable traits, that is variation in characteristics. They may be its height, its color of flower, their pod color, pod shape, their seed color, their seed shape. So these observable traits and their contrasting form, that is they are contrast to each other. Means the one plant is taller and one plant is dwarf. One plant having the purple flower, one plant having the white flower. So this is the contrasting form of this character, and these are the important for the observable tests for the study of this heredity of characteristics. Secondly, he chose garden pea because garden pea produce at the fast rate and reproduce several generations in short time. Basically, garden pea plant having the short period of reproduction so that we can reproduce many and several generations in a short time for our experiment. Thirdly, they are hardy plant and they do not need much caring. Basically, these are the hardy plants. They cannot need the care for such kinds of plant. Fourth of all, that is garden pea have its own structural adaptation of the self-pollination. So garden pea plant are chosen for the best experiment can be did because these are plants who having the ability for the self-pollination, and this is important for the study of hybridization and Mendelian experiment. So he chose the garden pea plants on its observable trait. So the procedure of this experiment, Mendel used about 29,000 pea plants and obtained 14 variety of seeds. So he chose the study of 7 traits. Basically, in last lecture we talking about the what kinds of the 7 traits he chose for his study. So basically, on garden pea plants he choose the 7 traits of characteristics of the pea plants for its study. So each trait having the 2 and more form, like height in the pea plants is a trait with 2 forms, that is short and tall. Short and tall. So he chose the traits which are observable and having the contrasting characteristics. That is pea plant having the tall height, also pea plant having the short height. Pea plant having the flower color, it may be the purple or it may be the white. So these contrasting characters having the 2 forms of the traits, and these are the useful for the experiment of the Mendelian work. So and also pea plant do not grow to be the middle size. In last lecture we saw the monohybrid cross in which we cross the single trait of the pure line of parent and cross to form the hybrid variety, and which is the all F1 progeny is tall. They are not middle height or middle size. So we can predict that some factor is responsible for the transmission of characteristics of the parental line. So this is the main base of the Mendel's work. That is what actually the factor is responsible for the such transmission of the character. So, the result of experiment, he chose the seven trait among the pea plant, that is height. In height, he used the two contrasting characteristics, that is one is a tall plant, one is a dwarf plant. Second is seed shape. One is a round shape, and second is wrinkle shape. Third is seed color. One is a yellow color, second one is green color. Seed coat, so seed coat color is green color and one is white color. Then pod shape, one is inflated and second one is constricted. Next one, that is pod color. So pod color, one is green and one is yellow. Where flower position, that is one is axial and one is a terminal. So above all these characteristics are the dominant character in pea plants, where these all are the recessive in the pea plants. So result of this experiment, so after the research with plants, the basic underlying principle of hereditary that he discovered also applied to people and other animal, because the mechanism of hereditary is essential the same for all complex life form. So the result of his work on the plant is given as the some factor are responsible for the transmission of characteristics of this organism from one generation to another generation. It is not related to just the plants, but it also applicable for the animals. They may be the simple form animals or they may be the complex form animals. These all are applicable for the organism. And he gives the idea of the heredity and variation and the factor which is responsible for the transmission of character, that is gene. So gene is responsible for the characteristics transmission from the one generation to another generation or from parents to offspring. So basically prince Mendelian gives the three principle on its experiment on the pea plant. So some biologists refer this principle, Mendel principle, as a law of heredity. So he gives the three principle for the heredity. First of all, that is law of dominance. Second one, that is law of segregation, and law of independent assortment. So these three law are applicable for the all animals on the basis of their heredity of characters. So first law, that is law of dominance. So what actually law of dominance say? So it state that when the pure breeding plants having contrasting characters are crossed, and all offspring will show only one of the character. So the character that appear is dominant and the one does not is recessive. So this law of dominance say that when we cross the pure parental line, for example, pure parental line in a tall height. So one is a tall plant and one is a dwarf plant. So when we cross this plant, the offspring show the only one character of one plant. So this is the dominant, and the character which appear in the F1 generation is dominant in nature, and one which is not appear, that is recessive. So in this we can say that the factor, one having the dominant character and one having the recessive character. So dominant allele suppress the characteristics of the recessive allele, so that it does not appear in the first generation. So meaning of this law of dominance, that is when certain genes come into two forms, one trait will be expressed over the other and dominant form over the recessive one. So basically recessive form are not appear in the F1 generation because the dominant allele suppress the appearance of recessive allele. So, for example, in P generation means the parental generation. So, there was a purple flower and white flower. When they were combined, don't expect that the result flower color was the light violet. So, when we cross the pure parental line, one is a purple flower. So, purple flower having the dominant characteristics, and white flower having the recessive characteristics or recessive allele. When they combine, we cannot expect that they may be form the light violet color, but result for the F1 generation, that is all plants having the purple flower. So why this occur? So the purple form of the trait was visible, but the white form was hidden. But when we cross the F1 generation, allow to the self fertilization and obtain the F2 generation, then in F2 generation we got the out of 4 3 plants having the purple flower, and out of 4 one having the white flower. Means the dominant allele suppress or masks the effect of the recessive allele. So that is the law of dominance, because one dominant allele suppress or hide the expression of recessive allele and cannot appear in the F1 generation because of the presence of dominant character. So that is the law of dominance. So in this figure you can see that, so this purple flower having the dominant form, that is dominant allele, that is which are dominant in trait, so which showing the purple form of plant, and this is the white flower with the parental generation. So these are the pure breeding variety, and this is the dominant allele, and this carry the recessive allele. When we cross these two parental generation and form the F1 generation, the all plants have the purple form. So this happen because of the presence of one dominant gene who suppress the expression of the recessive allele in the F1 generation. But when we fertilize the F1 generation by the self pollination, the F1 generation, F2 generation got the three flowers with purple color and one with white color. So in this way we can say that the dominant allele hide or suppress the mask the expression of the recessive allele. So that is the law of dominance, because it show the dominancy over the recessive allele. Second law, that is second law of segregation. So the law of segregation state that the two genes, a pair, separate or segregate during gamete formation, therefore the traits are distributed. So, in this law of segregation, we can say that two genes which carry the pairs of allele separate during the formation of gamete. So, during gamete formation, these two pairs are separated into the gametes and form the alleles are separated and form the gametes. So, therefore, the traits are distributed in the offspring. So meaning of this second law, that is members of pair of gene for hereditary characters separate cleanly from each other, so that only one member of the pair of gene goes into the particular gamete. So we know that the one trait having one gene with two allele. So during gamete formation, these two alleles separate from each other and form the only one member form the gamete. So, for example of this law of segregation, that is during formation of gametes, mother or father alleles segregate. So, basically we know that the one gene containing the two alleles, and during gamete formation these alleles separate from each other, so that and one allele come from father and one allele come from mother and form the zygote. So zygote only carries a single complete copy of gene. So in picture of next slide you see the T is for tall height and T for the short. So in F2 generation each zygote either has tall T capital T, or one has the small t from mother, or one t from, or one small t from father. So in this figure you can see that, so f2 generation, f1 generation having the two one gene which consisting the two allele. One is a capital T, one is a small t, same as it is here also. One is a capital T, one is a small t. So during formation of gametes, these alleles are separated from each other and form the gametes. So this is the T form the one gamete, and this is the T form the second gamete. So one come from the father and one come from the mother and form the complete gene in the offspring. So that is the law of segregation, because the gametes are segregated from each other. Third law, that is the law of independent assortment. So this independent assortment law state that the expression of one particular trait does not affect the expression of another trait. So we know that the Mendelian studied the seven characteristics of the pea plant, and these seven characteristics of pea plant having the different traits and different gene for them. So this law of independent assortment same say that the trait of one gene does not affect the trait of another gene. For example, the trait of tall and one is a color of flower. So the alleles of the flower color and alleles for the tall height does not interfere the expression of each other. So they appear independently or inherited independently. So this is the law of independent assortment, that is meaning the trait of one gene does not affect the inheritance of another trait. So characters whichever transmitted from one generation to another generation cannot be interfered by the second trait or second characteristic gene. So the gene are inherited independently. So let's see the law of independent assortment as an example. So for example, when we cross the F1 generation with the two traits such as a round shape and yellow color with the recessive trait like green color and wrinkle shape. So in F2 generation we produce the four type, that is round yellow, round green, wrinkle yellow, wrinkle green. So the result was the dominant trait, that is round shape, did not affect the recessive trait of the another kind, that is green color. So green color is a recessive trait of another, that is color. So color having the two trait, that is one is a yellow color which is dominant in nature and one is a green color that is which is recessive in nature. But the shape of color, that is one is round and one is a wrinkle, where round is a dominant and wrinkle is recessive. But round shape doesn't affect the trait of recessive trait of the color, that is green color. So therefore the green color may be recessive, but it can appear in the both round and wrinkle shape of pea plant. So the seed color trait, okay, so seed color trait does not affect the shape of seed. So in this way we can say that the independent assortment, that is the characteristics of the plant are independent on the characters of the pea plants. So in this is the dihybrid cross, so in which you can see that this is the gametes we put forward for the dihybrid cross. So in dihybrid cross we cross the two characters of one plant. So one is a round shape and one is a yellow color of pea plant, and one is a wrinkle shape and green color of plant. So we got the result, that is 9 are the round and yellow, 3 are the round green, 3 are the wrinkle and yellow, and 1 is a wrinkle and green. That is the result, that is 9 is to 3 is to 3 is to 1 phenotypic ratio. So in that way we can say that the trait, one trait cannot affect the other trait of plant or organism. So this character of such a trait are inherited independently. So this cases are also seen in the human cases also. So how this independent assortment take place. So these three laws are applicable for human being also. For example, the cystic fibrosis. So cystic fibrosis is a kind of disease, genetic disease, which affecting the Caucasian. So this Mendelian principle of hereditary apply universally to the all organism belonging to the earth. So this caused by the mutant. So this cystic fibrosis is a genetic disease which affecting mostly in Caucasian, so which caused by the mutant recessive gene carried by 1 in 20 people of European descent. Basically this cystic fibrosis caused due to the mutation in the recessive trait of gene. So about 1 in 400 Caucasian couple will both carrier of the cystic fibrosis. So 1 in 4 children will have it. So when the two parents are carrier of cystic fibrosis, they doesn't show the symptoms of cystic fibrosis, but their children show the symptoms for the cystic fibrosis. So 1 in 4 children having the cystic fibrosis disease. So cystic fibrosis disease affect the transport in tissue, and mucus is accumulated in the lungs causing the infections. So in this case, that is how the inheritance of cystic fibrosis occur in the human being. So if two parents are carriers the recessive gene of cystic fibrosis, that is they are heterozygous. Basically cystic fibrosis caused when the two alleles are recessive in nature. When the two alleles are recessive, then the cystic fibrosis disease are appear in the human being. But if two parents having the carriers, that is they just carry this recessive gene, one is a dominant gene, one is a recessive gene. So dominant gene suppress the expression of recessive gene. So the parents are the heterozygous for the cystic fibrosis. So 1 in 4 of their children are expected to the homozygous for cystic fibrosis and have the disease. So in this case you can see that this is the parent one which having the heterozygous genes, that is one is a dominant C, one is a recessive. Here also one is a dominant and one is a recessive. So the genotype of children we got, that is one is a dominant C, another is dominant C. So this child is normal in condition. Second one, that is one is a dominant, one is a recessive, that is they are heterozygous in condition, so that they are carriers without symptoms. So this is third one also having the one is dominant allele and one is a recessive allele, where last one that which consisting the both the allele, that is recessive C, showing the cystic fibrosis symptom, and the cystic fibrosis disease appear in the fourth children. So in this the inheritance of the cystic fibrosis are done by the generation by generation. So probability of this disease appear in the generation is, of course, the 1 in 4 probability of getting the disease is just an expectation, and in reality, the two carriers may have the normal children. So, this is the probability. So, probability that there may be 4 out of 1 children having the this disease, but this is the expectation. But anyhow the two carriers may have the normal children. So however the greatest probability is for 1 in 4 children to be affected. So there may be the probability is the all children should be the normal, or one is having the cystic fibrosis disease. So important factor when the perspective of the parents are concerned about their chance of having the affected children. So the parents which having the carrier, so they having the probability that the affected children may be, so children may inherit this recessive gene for which cause the cystic fibrosis. So now in 29 Americans, the symptoms less carrier of the genes. So another example, that is Gaucher disease. Gaucher disease is a rare genetic disease which causes the lipid storage disorder. This in this disease the lipid is accumulated in spleen, liver and bone marrow. So it is most common genetic disease affecting the Jewish people of Eastern European ancestry. So in this also the carrier of the parents having the probability to produce the one is a normal child and one with the Gaucher disease, and two are the carriers for the disease. So what happen if the one is a carrier and one is a normal people? So here the two children would be normal and two are the carriers for the disease. So that is for today. So in today's lecture we're talking about the principles of the Mendelian which put forward for the heredity and variation in the genetic field. So these are the law of dominance, law of independent assortment and law of inheritance. So all these law are applicable for the study of genetics and the organism. So I hope you understand this lecture. That is for today. Thank you.